All right, Noel. Episode 37 in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 37. I'm back here with my main man and fearless executive producer, Big Jimmy Kennedy, here to break down the week's events and hopefully make you guys laugh a little. Hey, Jimmy, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic, Noel. How are you, man? It's good to see you.
Thank you, man. This is my show week. My big show's coming up at the Wall Street Theater this Thursday, November 18th. There's still tickets available, so come on out. There's also virtual tickets. So if you listen to this podcast and you ever wonder what my live show is like, which I think many people do, because they're like, how could somebody so angry be funny? I promise you it's funny. It has the same kind of, truth that I like to point out on Twitter and in the podcast, but obviously I do it in a comedic format, and then I just kind of open up and start telling stories about my life on the road, which is I always leave that portion kind of open, which is exciting because it's like working without a net. A lot of these places I've been through with rock stars, and there's a lot of crazy things that happen on the road, and I love to tell that stuff. I love to make it a conversation. It's the audience that makes the show. That's probably never more true than comedy or jam bands. And I like mine to be like the jam band of comedy. It's like if Woody Guthrie had a jam band but told jokes, that's what I'm aiming for. So anyway, my point is it's streamed, so you can actually watch it live if you want to. Just check in with my Twitter and you'll find the link. So I'm looking forward to that, Jimmy. It's a big show for me. My friends, the immediate family, are playing in the same theater. I just talked to the great Russ Kunkel yesterday. He's one of the most legendary drummers in rock and roll. I mean, any of that Carole King, Tapestry, James Taylor, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Jackson Brown, you name it, that dude played on it. And he's like, I call him my godfather. He's just this really cool guy who gives me great advice. And so they're going to be there Tuesday night at the theater too. Leland Sklar, the greatest bass player ever. And or one of them, but so I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a good vibe in that room, and we're coming into that time of year where gratitude is the most important thing. It's Thanksgiving, but gratitude to me, Jimmy, is like my lifeline. Gratitude is how I connect with something bigger than myself, because it's easy to get bogged down the way things are going, and we're living in this outrage cycle where we're outraged all the time, and a lot of the problems I have, I try to speak out, and as I'll get I don't want to say attacked, but I'll make a joke. Here's an example. I made a joke last night. I don't even know what it was. It was about my Twitter feed was all about Christie, on all three networks, right? He's got a book coming out, right? He's selling a book, behind the scenes tell all on Trump, who he's not ruling out supporting again in the next election, right? The guy who killed 700,000 people, right? So Christie's got a book to sell. He's already got his ABC contract where he's all over ABC News on Sunday, right? CNN is running a special on Chris Christie tonight, as if that's relevant. As if anybody needs that, right? Yeah, right. And then all the other networks are just bending over backwards. Maggie Haberman did a big article on him yesterday. And so that was my feed. My feed was Chris Christie selling himself and the guy, the little general dude, Mike Flynn. Right. Oh, yeah. Mike Flynn telling a church full of QAnon believers, that we can only have one religion in this country and it has to be Christianity and we have to live under one God. Right. And I'll remind you that Mike Flynn's brother is in charge of the entire Pacific Fleet of the the Navy or whatever, the armed forces. He's a Pentagon official who wouldn't let the Pentagon get involved in stopping January 6th, so he was in on the, insurrection, and he was rewarded with that by being in charge of the Pacific Fleet. That's insane. That's a big chunk of the world and our military presence. And this lunatic's brother is in charge of it. Just to point out how dangerous something like this is, right? So that's what I see on my Twitter feed. right? So I make a joke to address that, but try to point out the truths of the situation. And I said, the only thing that'll save this country is if Christie runs out of snacks and eats Mike Flynn. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a joke meant to point out two things, right? One, that Mike Flynn is crazy and dangerous. Okay. And that Christie is a glutton. And I don't just mean this in terms of like eating too much. Okay. I eat too much. Like, I'm not, saying it that way. I'm talking about like he has an unlimited appetite to feed himself, whether that is power or money or attention. I've known the guy for 15 years. He's as scummy as they come in terms of politicians. I live in the tri-state area, and I'll tell a little story about him in a second, right? But that's the point of the joke I made. And then, of course, a lot of people liked it because I'm trying to lighten the mood, but keep my foot on the gas in terms of the truths that we have to be paying attention to, And it was one of these popular tweets or whatever. But then some people are like, fat shaming, not funny. How dare you fat shame him? You're better than that. First of all, I'm not better than that. So don't assume that. Assume you're following the wrong dude. And I block those people right away because I don't need the negative energy of somebody who's going to take their time to like make me tired in speaking out, because that's what it does. And here's the point I'm trying to make. Yeah, if I was sitting there, like if he was in a nightclub with his family and I just started talking about how fat he was to his face, that would be fat shaming. That would be bullying and just dumb and beneath me. And I don't do things like that in my act. I didn't tag him in the tweet. He's a big boy, no pun intended. He can survive it. But actually, it was kind of a pun in there. He's a very big boy. But
yeah.
The point is, I'm pointing out truths, and you have to roll up your sleeve. And what I'm trying to say is it gets so tiring on the left. We're like getting our asses kicked, whether you think it or not. The right wing and the QAnon nuts are having rallies every weekend. Fox News is broadcasting poison 24/7, and it's just one of the networks. Bannon gets an arrest warrant and gets the weekend off to record his podcast, and he shows up at his convenience on Monday, right? So they're kicking your ass, and we try to fight back. And then people on the left are like, oh, that's fat shaming. You shouldn't say that. It's not. Okay. And even if it is, this is the time for that. You got to start slinging some mud because they're gonna. Did you see what I'm saying, Jimmy? It's a big problem on the left. And it's not about me. It's just about you get so tired speaking out because you're not going to please everybody. Yeah, it's not pretty. This is not pretty to me. If the country wasn't in flames, you wouldn't even know my name. I wouldn't be here doing this. Trust me. I'd be out in my barn painting or playing guitars. I'm doing this because I know I do have a skill that's particularly suited towards this, because I survived a childhood where how you got through it in my neighborhood was learning how to like make fun of other people, and you had to do it like, you have to like swing for the fences. Like, when you're punching back on somebody, you got to like connect. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you got to be tough. Go.
As somebody with a disability, like, you had to be able to take a punch and dish it back out in a charming way. Not only did it have to be effective, it had to be smooth in order for you to walk away unharmed. I was never bullied, but like, I would hear the whispers in the hallway. Hey, look at Jimmy. Being subtly made fun of. And that's what the real bullies do, because they're too much of a, I'm not going to say the word, to actually confront somebody for being smaller than them. And I've made up for my size. As far as fat shaming, I've also made fun of myself. That's the way I survived school, was before I got made fun of, I made fun of myself. I'm a lot of material, by the way, between the, being overweight, having glasses, psoriasis, like, that's the other way that you can do it, is like, you get ahead of them by making fun of yourself, but then you just beat yourself up. So I've kind of learned to unlearn that behavior. But yeah, man, I totally get that. Like, it's going to public school can be difficult because you're just trying to find your place in whatever group that you fit in. And then eventually you get to the real world and you try to find out who you really are. I don't know.
Exactly. And bullying is horrible, and the times that I've made fun of somebody where I shouldn't have, they bother me to this day. I remember things I said as a kid where I could have taken a higher road. And I said something out of my own insecurity. My sense of humor is developed because I was so insecure inside. Right. I lived with a single mom. We had no money. I didn't know where my dad was. I slept on a Chase lounge for some of my childhood. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't have the cool clothes all the time. I had a lot of things I was, trying to cover up for. And I lived in a neighborhood that was brutal because poverty is brutal. Poor kids in my neighborhood were brutal on each other, just like that old Eddie Murphy sketch, like, you ain't got no ice cream, so your dad's an alcoholic. That was it, bro. That came out when I was like in 6th grade, and that described, perfectly what we were living in. But there was also laughter and love in that, and part of it is just kind of like, hey, we're going to get past this, suck it up. My shoes suck too, or whatever. There was a good natured part of it. It wasn't all brutal, but, just this cloying kind of like, oh, you shouldn't be saying that's not funny. Don't tell me what you think is funny. Unfollow me, but don't go out of your way to reply to it, because I'm going to block you, because it's tiring for me. It's like, I don't get paid for this. Yeah, I do comedy shows and I'm trying to get other people paid. That's why I'm doing these shows now, is people that are helping me, like you, Yeah. But, so I'm just trying to say, like, you better toughen up somehow. It's not always sinking to their level, but we have to get better at messaging and branding, like, because it's not really working the way it's going, like, we've had a couple victories, but they've gotten all this gerrymandering stuff through. They still have their spoilers like Joe Manchin, who's opposed to everything that comes out. He's there to be a spoiler. That's who he is. He's a human, like, block, he's a pick, like, he's setting a pick on any kind of legislative mobility that Trump and the Democrats have, out of his own narcissism, his own desire for more wealth, and he's got these crazy people on the other side, Kristen Sinema, they're a duo, right? And people are like, don't make fun of her clothes. I'm tired of you making fun of Kristen Sinema's clothes. Not to me, but I see people saying that on Twitter. It's like, no, she's wearing a fucking cutoff jean jacket on the floor of the Senate. You're doing it out of respect. You're dressing nice because you're representing other people in a very sober, serious environment. The guy who said that is a lawyer and he's a friend of mine, but I hardly think he tells his clients to wear a t-shirt when they're coming to court to face the judge. Right? You dress a certain way out of respect, and it has nothing to do with money. And Kristen Sinema has plenty of money, right? So she's not dressing appropriately because she doesn't have the funds. You could walk into any Goodwill in America and get an outfit that is appropriate to wear, on the Senate. And if you don't have it, I'll send you a gift card, Kristen. But get some goddamn clothes and have some respect, because you're representing people's lives. Some little kid's not going to go to a dentist because she's blocking legislation. Some old person's not going to get eye care, and dental care. It's insane that the problems we're facing, and we're not, like, calling it out like it should be. The reason Trump became president, because he had no qualms about bullying everybody on that stage, and he went through them one after another and knocked them down like bowling pins. Right? Ted Cruz, little Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush. He was just ripping him a new one, because he's a guy from New York who grew up around mobsters, and busting each other's balls is what you do. You need a New York, you know what you need? You need a Democratic New Yorker. Like, you need somebody from this world. That's why I spoke out about Trump, because I'm like, I know who this guy is. People are like, aren't you afraid to talk about him? No, I'm not afraid. He's a coward. I've seen the dude. He wears makeup and a fucking diaper. You know what I mean? He's the scaredest, like, little prick you'll ever meet. He surrounds himself with cops, ex-NYPD cops, and tough guys, and Chuck Zito and Hell's Angels and stuff, to appear cool, because he knows he's going to get into some blow and some, sexual predation at the party, and he doesn't want to get his ass kicked. Okay. But one-on-one, the guy's a coward because he has such a deep desire to be liked. And you need people that aren't afraid to call out the BS. That's the big problem, is that everyone's trying to play nice, and we're well past nice. You're not getting this country back to the way you had it. Sorry to say, Trump broke it. You let a guy like that sleep in your bed, you need to throw out the mattress, as a metaphor. You know what I'm saying, Jimmy?
Well, bro, you were talking about like the representation visually, the optics that Christian cinema is giving off wearing, Sons of Anarchy garb on the floor of the Senate. Ted Cruz showed up in his basketball shorts and was mad that they interrupted his basketball game when he's a representative for the state of Texas. And you talked about like the importance of dressing nice and everything else. Kyle Rittenhouse could show up in a thong and he's still going to get away with this thing because of the judge. I mean, this judge is crazy. The text that he's reading, he had the defense get a standing ovation. Like, I haven't seen that in movies, let alone real life. Like, it's a rigged system and they're bragging about it on live TV.
Great example. And look, he had them applaud the first witness, that the defense called, and people defended that when it was called out. People that follow me, and I saw him on Twitter being like, oh, well, he was just honoring the veterans. No, he wasn't. Yeah. He'd already had the pretrial information, so he knew that witness was a veteran. That was a loaded question. That's why he said it like, hey, is anybody in here in the veteran? A veteran, not just jurors, any person in here. That was the lead for that guy to raise his hand. And then he's like, let's give a round of applause to this guy, right? So he was setting the jury up to say, hey, here's the hero. The guy who's in favor of what the defense is arguing is the real American who served this country. That's why he spends the rest of the time berating the prosecution. That is the craziest thing I've ever witnessed, this trial. This judge, he had his ringtone that went off that was Lee Greenwood's. If that happens and I'm on trial, you might as well just fire up the electric chair, because I know my ass is going to jail. You know what I mean? Yeah. This guy couldn't be any more blatant. He's reading cookie catalogs. That's the same thing that, Jim Jordan does when he yawns during Trump's impeachment. They're trying to be like, look how boring this is. Look at these boring liberals. Oh, now the defense is speaking. Yeah, God bless America. This is kick ass. And why don't you do an impression? Did you see the way the guy cried, Jimmy?
Yeah, I can't do it justice. I mean, the Oscar goes to Kyle Rittenhouse.
No, not an Oscar, Jimmy. That was the worst acting ever, is overacting. If you want to win an Oscar, I'll tell you how you do it. You try your hard not to cry. Okay. If you want to be really emotive and you want to really affect people, get just to the point you're about to cry and then try not to cry. Double it back. That's how you're going to show truthful. You don't look like you're having a convulsion. That guy was just like, what are you doing? It was the most stupid, over the top thing, and it'll work. He's going to
just like Kavanaugh, man. Just like Kavanaugh. Same deal.
Right. White boy cry, fat face crying. Sorry to fat shame, but that kid looks like he has a big glass of gravy and buttermilk for breakfast every day,
Yeah. Well, I look forward to Chris Christie being on TLC, my 600-pound life. He's going to be great on that show.
Oh, man, we're going to get hate mail. So let me tell you a Chris Christie story, dude.
All right.
Let me tell you. So we did Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy. I'm sure you heard about it, Jimmy. It was this massive, storm that we had in 2012 and in New York, right? In the end of October and stuff. And it just destroyed, parts of New York City, the Rockaways, and Jersey got hit probably the hardest, right? So Chris Christie's state was just, practically underwater. And a couple days after it, like 2 days after it, not even, I think the storm was like on a Wednesday or a Tuesday. On Friday, we did a benefit at NBC, a telethon to raise money because people needed everything. Their homes were destroyed, So we did this telethon and you had like Springsteen and Bon Jovi. I was there working with Bon Jovi and all these people come in, right? And then Chris Christie came in. We had leaders come in like Cory Booker, who was literally driving around for 2 days telling people like, just DM me what you need. And he was dropping off Pampers at 2 a.m. to his constituents in Newark. Like, it was one of the most heroic things I've seen a politician do. And I remember his security guard was there and I was like, yo, is this guy legit? He's like, is he legit? He's like, bro, somebody will be like, yo, I need baby food. I'm at such and such. And he'll hit me up and be like, yo, we're going there now, dude. And he'll go buy it out of his own pocket and drop it off. I mean, that guy is out there helping people, right? So contrast it with this, Chris Christie is the governor of the state. The first thing he does is have a photo op with Obama. President Obama flies up and they walk around the beach or something to survey the damage, because Christie sees it as his big moment to be like a moderate. Christie's eyeing the White House at this point. So he's using this whole thing for his own optics. Again, gluttony, caring more about feeding yourself and your own ambitions than helping people, right?
Right.
So once he hears Springsteen is playing, because it was Bruce and the E Street Band, I think we did it in Jimmy Fallon's studio. And so Christie is a lifelong Springsteen fan, right? He's a Jersey guy, and he's always been chasing Bruce to get a picture and a photo op, and Bruce ain't falling for that. Okay. Bruce is a Democrat and you ain't using him. Reagan tried it with Born in the USA and he ain't stupid. Right. So he'd been dodging that. Right. But Christie is invited to, give a speech and ask for help on this telethon. And he hears that Springsteen's going to be on it too. So he comes into New York City, to where we're filming in Rockefeller Center, and brings a shoebox full of ticket stubs to show Bruce what a fan he is, and tries to get into his dressing room, and Bruce's guys are like, no, we're not doing this. But he was like, can I get a picture and stuff, and I don't remember if he actually got the picture, but I remember witnessing it and being like, how shameless is this? This guy's got millions of people that are living underwater without power right now, and he's trying to get a fucking selfie with Bruce Springsteen and brag about how many shows he'd been to. And I was watching it with Bon Jovi, who just drove in from feeding people at a soup kitchen, and driving around his town in Jersey and making sure people were okay, and Bruce was there with his band because he knew he could raise a lot of money. He did the same thing after 9/11. He shows up to help people. And here's the governor of the state showing up for his own, aggrandization, for his own star trip to meet Bruce, and obviously to help his own political career, because he obviously wanted a photo to be like, look, here's me and the boss, helping out. He's not helping out. Okay. And first of all, he went along with Trump the whole time, right? He tried to get in on that orbit. Nobody knows what a scumbag the Kushners and Trump are, probably better than Chris Christie, because when he was a federal prosecutor, obviously he prosecuted Charles Kushner, and he got a lot of the info he used to sort of make Kushner take the deal from Trump himself. And we can touch on that in another episode. It gets complicated, but Charles Kushner used to step out with prostitutes in New York City, prostitutes that look more like you and I than your mom, if you know what I mean, or sister, but it's not really good to be that way if you're an Orthodox, conservative Jew. So, and they had him over a barrel. The New Yorker started to touch on that, but they didn't point out the sex of the prostitute, which has a lot to do with the story. And that's why Charles Kushner took the deal, because billionaires don't generally take deals and go to prison. And Kushner took it right away. And what Kushner did was set up his brother-in-law with a prostitute, because he was trying to screw his sister out of money in the family business, right? So he did the same thing he'd been doing, which is Trump 101, right? It's always projection. It's always these, we're going to accuse you of what we do himself. And he thought he'd get away with it. Just like Trump never planned on Putin holding all of the tapes that he had on him, because Trump's like, I do this to everybody else. Nobody's filming me. So anyway, Chris Christie, if he had any balls, and he doesn't, you've seen his little camel toe when he does the baseball. Have you ever seen the picture of him throwing out a pitch?
Regretfully, yes.
It's like somebody put a watermelon. Talk about that's called subprepubic fat, Jimmy. Just if you want to know the technical term for that, it's the fat that builds up above your groin area. Subprepubic fat. It's something that he has in common with Trump. Trump has a huge amount of that too. That's why they strap him into a girdle when he goes out in public. Just to gross everybody out. Thanksgiving is coming out. Okay, that gravy goes right to your subprepubic fat. Okay, but anyway, my point is he could have buried Trump, and he's a criminal himself. Chris Christie made a woman who worked in his office take the hit for closing down the bridge. They put the screws on a politician in North Jersey and shut down a bridge just to screw the guy, to make his constituents hate him, which meant people were sitting in ambulances and couldn't get to the hospital and died. So, and he got away with it. So my point is, he's a scumbag. You're fighting scumbags. Okay. So stop attacking everybody on the left. Come up with a game plan how you're going to save this thing that you're probably not even going to be able to save at this point. You know, people are really Pollyanna-ish about like, oh, we're going to vote them out. Blue wave is coming. You know, those gerrymandered districts are going to be a rude awakening.
Well, and they can throw out the results. You know, in certain states,
Exactly.
they've got the electors where they can just say, we think we won, you know, and your story about Chris Christie reminded me of the way Giuliani, you talked about him and the way he would be like proud walking around at the 9/11 ceremonies.
Right.
That's not a day where you're proud, man. Like, at least be somber. You know,
you nailed it. You nailed it.
God.
No, that's it. You nailed it, Jimmy.
Yeah,
You said it better than I did. That was the thing. He was smiling. He's like, oh, look, it's Springsteen. You know, like what? This is not one of those shows where we're like, oh, let's celebrate. You know, this reminds me, we did a benefit for that thing at the Garden, like a few weeks later. It was called 12/12 something Sandy benefit, right? We had the Rolling Stones. That was when I was working on the Stones East Coast tour, and so they played it. You know, everybody. And I was the AFTRA coordinator, the SAG AFTRA coordinator, which means you have to get everybody to sign off this paperwork because it's going to be televised, right?
Right.
And I got everybody to sign it. Billy Joel, Springsteen's camp, Stones, everybody, you know, except for Kanye. And I'm chasing Kanye all night, and it's like poor road because he's the worst to work with, right? Everyone knows it, just a nightmare, as you could imagine, right? So like, and he muscled his way into the show. He wasn't asked originally, and he just kept hammering people like, you got to have me on this thing. I got to be here. Ye's got to be here. And we're like, it's not really about the artist though. We're trying to do this as a benefit. You know, we don't want to have to pay a bunch of extra money because you're going to be a nightmare and not show up on time and stuff. Like everyone knew he was, right? But so they relented and let him on the show. And then I'm the first guy who sort of has to deal with him legally to get this paperwork. And I'm chasing him all night. And finally, his man, and it's only to get like $700 or whatever the SAG wage is. So it's not really about the money. It's about getting the rights to use the footage, right? Because it's a fundraiser, right? And at one point they were going to put out a movie or something, you know, DVD or something to make more money for the people we're raising money for. I'm chasing this guy all night. And it's like, 10 minutes later. And I'm not chasing Kanye. I know better than to talk to him. I'm chasing like the tour manager guy, you know? And finally, he was this British guy. And finally he goes, hey, mate, let's be honest. This guy's never fucking signing this thing. You know? And I'm like, I know. He's like, stop wasting your time. Whatever will happen, will happen. You know, we just won't use his footage. And that's what happened. We couldn't use the performance that he muscled his way into and raise any money off of his name or his thing because he was too nutty to do his basic housekeeping and sign the thing, you know? Right. And my point is like, there's some events you just stay away from if you're a narcissist, you know, 9/11 with Giuliani, you know, Chris Christie with, you know, a fundraiser telethon kind of thing. And that's how he was smiling and thinking about himself. Meanwhile, people were sitting there with 3 feet of water, you know, in their living room and wondering how their baby was going to get like, you know, milk and diapers the next day. Like, and this asshole is in here trying to get, you know, a picture with Springsteen. It makes you angry. And what makes me angry about it is how much of the media ecosystem feeds into this thing. You know, why do you think CNN and New York Times and you know, ABC are all on board with Chris Christie? Because there's money in it. There's a lot more money on the right than there is on the left, because people on the left do other things, right? But people on the right just consume hate. That's why on Fox News, right, they've been attacking Kamala Harris all week because she used a proper, you know, accent when speaking French, because she went to school in Montreal, right? Quebec, Canada, a French province of Canada where they speak French. So she used the proper pronunciation of the or whatever. And it was like the end times on Fox News. Meanwhile, they had Kyle Rittenhouse's mother on there, you know, who couldn't speak English. She couldn't, you know, I don't mean speak English like in a racist way. I mean, she didn't have any sentence structure. She was obviously uneducated, you know, which is no problem. I want the uneducated speaking. It's why I get so mad when people try to correct other people's grammar on Twitter. It's like, that's not the place for this. We want everybody's voice. Okay. But you can't pretend like you're outraged at Kamala Harris, an educated African-American woman who happens to be the vice president of the United States, and you should pay her the respect that she deserves, right? But they'll attack her and not say a damn thing about some white trash lady who can't even talk, who bought her son, who drove her son with his like illegal weapon across state lines to kill people. And she's a hero. So there's a reason that they have her on there, because that's how they want their team to ingest things. Hey, don't trust these fancy people speaking in these foreign tongues. Here's a nice fat white woman like you like. She talks like you do, right? Yep. She talks like every conversation she has in the line at Walmart, right?
Well, I know for a fact that I wasn't carrying an AR-15 around at 17 years old, asking my mom to drive to another county to go to a riot to, shoot 2 people and paralyze another. And the fact that, Fox News is using Kyle Rittenhouse's mom to score points with their base, knowing that the people that Kyle killed, those parents don't get their children back. they're gone, exactly. So, yeah, I mean that, and Mark Meadows was on Newsmax. I saw a clip of this before I got on the show. He was saying, this commission, it's their way or the highway. That's what a fucking subpoena is, man. Like, they're walking around. It's the impunity that they're walking around with that makes it so goddamn frustrating.
Because they know they're going to get away with it, Jimmy. They always do. Just like Trump stalls everything in court because he knows he's got more money than you. Summer Zervos, who I've met, had to drop her lawsuit this week because after 5 years, she couldn't afford to do any more to keep it going. It costs a lot to spend $700 an hour on a lawyer. And Trump knows that. He knows he'll grind you down. Yeah, he may be a fake billionaire, but he's got enough to spend on lawsuits over the average person. And most people don't want to be bothered. So they're applying the same thing,
Well, how is Kyle Rittenhouse's mom not under arrest? She knows something, having driven him there.
That should be a bigger deal than it is, Jimmy. She's somehow getting a pass that a parent was involved in this. I drove through Sandy Hook yesterday. Okay. The mom of that shooter brought her son who had behavioral issues, right? We don't know what he was because he's dead, but he was something. There was something wrong with the kid. He was on the spectrum somehow, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he had some sort of thing where he wasn't communicative, he wasn't normal with his siblings or his parents. So she wanted to bond with him. So she bought him the AR-15 to bond with him. And she was his first victim. He walked into her bedroom and shot her first, dead with this thing. You don't give your troubled son an AR-15. I can tell by Kyle Rittenhouse looking at him in court that kid's a psychopath too. I can see it all over his goddamn face, and they asked him why he wanted that gun. He said, because it looked cool. And like you said, when I was 17, what looked cool to me? Titties and guitars. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
True. Do you know what I'm saying? And you get a gun looks cool. You got TikTok. You're in the renaissance of being a teenage boy. You can call up girl, you can look on your phone and look at hot chicks all day.
Swipe right, brother. Come on.
Exactly. And you're trying to go, shoot people in another state. But, I'm saying that lighthearted, but that's the reality is they're building warriors. He probably thought he'd get chicks of them doing that. And by the way, there's a video of him beating the hell out of a girl on Twitter. He got in a fight in a parking lot and it was swinging wildly on this girl. And the 2 guys that were filming it sounded to me like African-American guys that I'm not trying to get, but they sounded like black guys. And as soon as they heard it, they flew out of that car and stopped the fight and did the right thing, and that's not allowed to be in court. Right. The dude was beating on women, which is a big part of this whole thing. Most of the guys that work with Trump are violent against women. It's part of this whole white Christianity, woman's places in the house, all this bullshit,
That's so true because I shared something on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it. It's my personal account. And it was for all the folks sharing pictures of Kyle Rittenhouse cleaning up graffiti. Here's a picture of Charles Manson playing guitar in a church. Just because you're doing a good deed, it doesn't mean you're not crazy and you shouldn't be in prison. Right. Stop. I'm not, it's not an equal equation, but look at the totality of this guy in the time that this has happened, and obviously the judge is compromised. It's just look at it from the outside, not just an isolated view. I don't know.
I know, but it's again,
Yeah.
these totems of what they're selling as this white kind of like, we're the good guys,
Right.
dumb, ignorant white people with guns in a Bible. Marjorie Taylor Greene put a picture of her reading a Bible with like 15 crosses behind her on the wall. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not reading the Bible. Okay. The Bible's hard to read. Okay. Like I've heard her talk. She doesn't know what's in the Bible. It's just this trigger word. They had as we said at the top of the show, there's a QAnon rally in a mega church last night.
Yeah.
Those things are tax free, right? They get 30,000 people every Sunday giving up their money to a pastor who isn't paying a dime in taxes, and he's going out and buying another Ferrari or a Lamborghini, to park in front of his 17,000 square foot house, and people eat this stuff up like it's crazy.
Well, and they're chanting "Let's go, Brandon"
right.
in the pews.
It's
not a Yankees game. Not that that's appropriate at a Yankees game, but this is church, for Christ, for God's sake. Like, don't do it. Man, we are at a unfamiliar territory, dude. Like, this is I've never seen this before. The way this is going,
nobody's seen it before. And the supply chain BS. I was at a mall on Friday, the Danbury Mall. Jimmy, there are no shortages of goods out there. Okay. I know there's some worldwide because we shut down the world for a year and a half. So go figure, the part for your washing machine is going to be a little backed up, because factories were closed for a while in Asia. But like, there's a lot of crap out there to buy. The painting it like there's not going to be any Christmas because there's nothing to buy. There's all kinds of cheap shit out there in all those department stores, Primark and Uniqlo and all these places that Americans shop, and they think, oh, what a bargain. I can get a hiking boot for $20 and a pair of cargo pants and all this other cheap crap that I just bought a year ago, and then I'll give it away and we'll send it over to Ghana and it'll like destroy the beaches and the infrastructure. Because that's the downside of all this cheap shit that everybody's buying now all the time. We give it away every year and put it in those dumpsters that you see in the parking lots and stuff. That stuff, there's a big business in shipping that stuff to Africa. And Ghana was one of the big countries taking it in. Right.
Yeah.
And there's so much of it that they can't keep up with it. So it's just piling up everywhere. So half the country is just like a big pile of like clothes. You know what I mean? And they're on the beaches. They're going into the ocean and killing marine life and stuff because there's too much of it. Sure. You don't need that kind of stuff. Save up and buy the $50 sweater and take care of it. I'm not saying people shouldn't have access to cheap goods, but there's just way too much of it. I walked through a store called Primark on Friday and I couldn't believe it. This stuff was just cheap and there's just tons of it and just completely disposable and made out of polyester and crap and plastic. There's just like nothing good of it. It's the clothing equivalent of like this, water bottles, plastic water bottles. You know what I'm saying? Like buy a reusable water bottle, because you're flooding the planet with this crap. You're not going to keep it. It's not going to last you a long time. You know what I mean? It's just junk and you're going to throw it out next year when or 6 months from now or something. And I think it is Ghana. Yeah, it's Ghana. It's the African nation that was sort of doing a lot of this brokering because they'll sell this stuff. But, the stuff that doesn't get resold in Goodwill and places in America gets shipped to Africa. You're basically sending our junk there. They don't need it, and they're like, stop, we've got too much. Stop sending it here, so that's part of our society is we feel like, well, I'm giving it away to charity. Well, there's enough shit in the world, like the problem we have in the world isn't people walking around naked anymore, like
one of the best documentaries I saw in college, it was about consumer capitalism. And this was about more the grocery store and how like, you don't need 15 types of Chips Ahoy cookies. That's not the way the world used to work.
Right.
And it creates so much trash that it adds to global warming and, the ocean gyres and things. And like shampoo is another, there should only be a few kinds of shampoo as opposed to the 80 types that we have at our selection.
Well,
Americans like options, but we need a few less options for the good of the planet.
Absolutely. And things that come in disposable plastic bottles should just be illegal, period. Yeah. You should have to bring a jar and buy it in bulk. That's how you should get your shampoo. You should be in a refillable thing or some kind of biodegradable pouch that comes to your house, and then you pour it in your permanent like container. Throwing out a plastic bottle and a plastic razor and a plastic whatever. You know, the first piece of plastic ever made is still on this planet, Jimmy. Plastic has a half-life of like billions of years. It doesn't disintegrate. You and your brethren and any kids you'll ever have will be gone from this earth before the plastic toothbrush that you used when you were 5 years old will. Okay, that's the reality of this stuff, and it has to go somewhere, and it will be illegal someday. You know, there'll be someday it'll be like, can you believe people did this stuff? Just like now, we're like, can you believe they did foot binding? You know, do you know what foot binding is, Jimmy?
Oh, is that from Asian cultures?
Yeah, they thought it was attractive to have small feet in a women, so they would wrap a rope around the feet and like deform the bones into like these little like tiny hooves.
Right.
Right. That's insane. Right.
Yeah.
That's insane. Right. It's insane that we would kill whales for oil. You know, sperm whales to get whale oil to put in a heating lamp. Use a candle. Right. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that was cutting edge fuel technology at one point on this planet. Whale oil, right? Just like, you know, if we survive 1,000 years from now, they'll be like, can you believe people would burn coal? Like, how stupid are these people? They would dig up a hole in the ground and take oil out of it, knowing it was this poisonous thing that had no business in society. And then someone else will be like, they didn't just make oil out of it for cars. They made everything out of it. Plastic bottles, because all that stuff's made out of oil. That's what petrochemicals are. And that's what the Koch brothers sell, right? So now you see how it's all connected. The Koch brothers are the supply chain. You know, they're like the drug dealer that moves this stuff, right? They got all the pipelines and everything, and they have all the plants, the refinery, because that's where the money comes in. It's like how you're breaking it down. You know, the guy who's making the crack is getting a big bunch of money, and distributing the crack is making more money than the guy who just brings the kilo of weight over on the speedboat, right? So they're the guys that are controlling the infrastructure, and that's why they're controlling the political infrastructure in this country. You follow me? You know what I'm saying? That's why they're buying politicians, and that's why the politicians that are aligned with those people are so desperate to promote ignorance over education. That's why they're burning books. That's why they don't want you understanding what critical race theory is. Right? Because if too many poor whites learn how bad we screwed over blacks, they're going to realize how bad they're getting screwed over too, and how much they participated, you know, in a system that was never aligned to help them. And that's never been more exaggerated than it is now, right? Because the 1%ers, the billionaires, control like 98% of the wealth. And we're over here fighting over crumbs, whether old people should have like dental care or not. Right? Dudes are flying into space on rocket ships, and we can't agree on whether grandpa should be able to chew bread.
Yeah. I mean, and at some point, you know, it's Michael Flynn, the crazy general, ex-general, who is saying that America needs to be one nation under God, you know, all this crap. Yet they're not doing the Christian thing in action, giving money to people to take care of their teeth, to improve their bodies, improve their lives. You know, that's part of the con too. And we've talked about it. That's part of the danger in this. They've not only tied nationalism together, they've tied Christianity into it, which is and you've mentioned it here before. I'll say it now. That's exactly what happened in the Middle East and what we fought for 20 years. And look what happened. It came home to affect us, you know, all for one guy.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're doing it like this, my team against your team. That's the most dangerous thing, is this binary kind of polarization. You know, my car rant on Friday was about this forced tribalism, you know, and how people aren't looking at facts. They're just like, screw you, I'm voting against, you know, the Build Back Better plan, you know, and they had death threats against the 13 Republicans that voted for bridges, for roads, for things that are going to help their constituents, which is literally the gig. You know, the gig of a congressman is go to DC and get me some money, because I need to get this road fixed that I drive to work on every day. And I want my kids to be in a school bus that isn't going to be like from 1971, you know, and like polluting the planet when it takes them down the road. So go get us some help for this. I'd like to have Wi-Fi too. Get us broadband, right? But the 13 people that voted for that got death threats. immediately. And who told him to, attack them? Trump did, right? He had a rally at Doral down in Miami, and he said, like, those guys are scumbags. They gave Biden a win. I just can't have it. So they attacked him. And one of the ladies had to leave the place. She was shaken. She was so scared. She was shaken because she's from Staten Island too. So she knows who Trump knows, and knows, like, you go against the mob, it doesn't work out well for your health, and it just reminds me, I'm supposed to talk about that Harold Bornstein thing for one of our listeners.
Oh, yeah.
I'd have to do that next week, because that's a lot for people to, I'm already kind of firing on, I'm already got the amp up to 11 on this episode. But anyway, so, like, that's what my car rant is about, is this tribalism. And you know how I put these out every Friday. I do them like Trump, truth, and then I'll pick 3 subjects that are in my little 2-minute rant. GOP, DOJ, and tribalism was this one, right?
Right.
I put it out. A friend of mine retweeted it, Bonnie Raitt's guitar player, the great George Marinelli. And somebody commented on his thing. Tribalism is a racist word. You white people are just so jealous of our indigenous people's success. Okay. Okay. Now, first of all, I'm sorry if I offended anybody, and I'm a former road manager for Bad Dog, which is John Trudell's group. John Trudell helped found the American Indian movement. He was one of the guys, like with Leonard Peltier and stuff, one of the guys who brought Native American rights into the forefront in the 70s. He's as big a hero. He's like the Martin Luther King of the, American Indian, and a poet, and this great guy. He was a musician. He had a band and everything. Just a wonderful guy that this chick probably didn't even know who he was, right? But she didn't, and she probably didn't even listen to my rant, because she could clearly say, I'm probably an ally in some respects. Do you know what I'm saying? If you look at my body of work, it's not to insult minorities. Okay. Like, how many times have we talked about what we've done to Native American cultures on this show? Okay. But she just immediately does that because she sees a trigger word, right? Tribalism, that's racist. Okay. Do you know what the Celtic tribes are, Jimmy? Let me give you a couple examples of the Celtic tribes, which started in Central Europe. The Irish came out of the Celtic tribes, and the Britons came out of the Celtic tribes. I'm compromised of Irish and British blood, right? So I'm a tribal member. Do you see what I'm saying? She just thought tribes immediately meant American Indians, right?
Instead of the term itself as a grouping of people.
It's a political construct in how I'm saying it. And it wasn't like I said Indian giver or, some kind of thing that I could see would be in poor taste. But like tribalism, you didn't invent the word tribes, but it's just that kind of thing that you go, oh, for fuck's sake, God, why? And that's the left. That's that thing I'm trying to talk about. And you'll get less and less people speaking out, unless you're in it for a pack. If you got your own pack, you don't care. If you and your brothers are getting rich, send my video around, send me money, help me battle, then yeah, this is a good scam. But if you're not in it for the money, if you really care about this stuff, you're going to get worn down by this sort of online Twitter culture. It's part of the same beast, the same outrage, Lincoln's Project, oh, they're heroes. Now there's some smart guys there. But we lost Max Cleland this week. Max Cleland's life was destroyed by Rick Wilson. Max Cleland was a guy who spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair because his legs got blown off in Vietnam, right? And then Rick Wilson launched a horrific campaign against him, questioned his patriotism, and a guy named Saxby Chambliss became the senator from Georgia. Just scumbag Republican dude who isn't even there anymore. You know what I mean? It was just a money mercenary transaction, and they took out this guy. And Max Cleland suffered from depression. It was trauma for him. He spent 5 years. And that dude, you as somebody who spent time in a wheelchair, it would take him 4 hours in the morning just to get ready to go to work on Capitol Hill, because his life was so difficult because he was in a wheelchair, and it took him, he had to put on his pants and do all this extra stuff that we don't even see. This extra burden with living with disabilities that you got from serving your country, in a horrible, unjust war, right? But you still did it. And then you went there and tried to change the laws. And then some slick guy who made $60 million, just last year off of bashing Trump. Yeah, they're bashing Trump, but they're also putting money in their own pockets. And I'm not trying to attack those guys. I happen to be sort of friends with Rick Wilson. I've interviewed him on other shows. We follow each other on Twitter. He did steal one of my jokes, but I let him have it, right? It was the fat Wolverine.
Right.
That's what I used to call Ted Cruz. And then he got all this credit and they wrote articles, Lincoln Project's new fat Wolverine goes viral. And he's like, thanks, it's happy to be part of the team. He wasn't like, actually, Noel had said that about 20 times before in the last 2 years. That's how it is. It's a business, right? And that's how I want people to view it. These people are making money off of you. The hero you're looking for has not come forward yet. They're out there. Greta Thunberg, AOC, you can see the generation that has their heart in the right place and they're trying to get up there, but the powers that be are like, whoa, slow down now. That's not how we do things. You got to go through the right circumstances. You got to let Steve Bannon turn himself in on Monday morning. Right. They don't let any of the hundreds of black men that get murdered in the streets of America wait till Monday morning. Right. Well, they didn't go up to they in Minnesota. They didn't say, hey, George Floyd, you need to come in Monday morning. We think you've passed a fake $20 bill. Right. They choked him to death on the street in front of his community. Right. There's two sets of justice in America. This is an apartheid state. OK. And a lot of white people like to pretend that it's not. That's the reality, is that white people don't want to be offended by how fucked up things have been in this country for too long. For too many people. And we think, hey, we shouldn't talk about that. That's not polite. Until you talk about it, you don't get past it. It's like when you get sober, Jimmy, you do a 4-step. The 4th step is where you do what's called a moral inventory. You write down all the bad shit you've done in life, and then you admit it to another person. You say, I did this out of fear, out of jealousy, out of anger, out of resentment. We're a whole country that's been doing policy out of those same things for hundreds of years. And we don't really want to talk about it because I personally didn't do it. That's the big excuse white America gives themselves. Well, nobody gave me a handout. My grandfather came here from Italy and started putting in paving stones and then built up this business. And now I got to give somebody else who doesn't want to work. Dude, everybody wants to work. Okay. It's harder to work if you're coming up with, the system's boot on your throat. If you're viewed as a criminal every time you walk in a store and have an arrest record by the time you're 25, how are you supposed to work? Right? You got busted for the same thing that Country Club kid got away with. He's in Stanford right now, and you're in fucking lockup. Right? Who's going to get the job on the other side? Who's going to get the political power? Who's going to control the money? That's what we're about. That's where we're at. All the evil and all the bullshit we've done, we have to get honest with. We have to educate people. That's why they want to burn books. That's why they use CRT as the new, catchphrase to just terrify people. And it works, right? That's why you got a Republican and governor of Virginia now. It works like a charm. Their game plan is laid out in front of them. The left is going to try to fight back. But as I said, we're going to nip at each other over terms. And anybody who's not making $1 million with their pact is just going to walk away and say, you know what? I'm not even bothering anymore. Go watch your little videos and share them with your friends and enjoy living under an authoritarian rule.
I didn't think that Fahrenheit 451 would be a prophecy. I read it in high school thinking we're never going to get there, but we're at the brink of that.
Yeah, man.
And it's scary. I know that's simplified, but one thing that I did this week that kind of humbled me a little bit. I went to a great place for lunch. It's called the Working Man's Friend in Indianapolis. It's one of the oldest restaurants in town. It opened in 1918 when the last pandemic was ongoing. And the owner of it knew my great-grandmother and my great-grandparents. One side of my family came from Russia, to the United States, wanting a better life for them and their kids, so to meet somebody that knew my great-grandparents and were the first generation of Americans to be here, and I got to enjoy something that they did, back in the day. It was humbling to see, but it also told me that we've been through other things before. This is the most challenging thing and the biggest threat to our republic, but it kind of brought me back to like, there were people that came from humble beginnings in your family and they would be proud of you where you are now. So don't make it about us versus them. We're all in this together, trying to build a better thing for everybody at the end of the day. Or what are we here for?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, well, that's where we should be. Well said, Jimmy. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. The Working Man's Dead is also a great Grateful Dead album.
Oh yeah, I'll have to check that one out. Always looking for new music.
Well, new music. It came out in 1970.
New for me. New for me. Yeah.
But anyway, and that's the one where my boys Crosby, Stills, and Nash taught the Dead kind of how to sing. You know, that was where they went down to acoustic instruments and tried to tighten up their song structure and their harmonies. It's a great album. Uncle John's Band, you know that song, Come Here, Uncle John's Band.
Yeah, I'm sure I've heard it before.
Oh, you're fired. Okay, Jimmy, we'll have a new host next week. Jimmy's never heard Uncle John's Band. But how about Adele? You heard of Adele, Jimmy?
Yes, I've heard of Adele.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's got a special on this tonight. She's a crazy singer like that. I was doing a VMAs out in LA at the Staples Center, and I was sitting at my desk. The production office was just off of the main part of the arena, and it was empty, you know, and she was sound checking, and I'm sitting at my computer, same one I'm talking to right now, actually. And I hear this singing, you know, and I just gone through this breakup, you know, and I hear this singing. And I'm like, I'm trying to ignore it, but it just keeps coming through. It's like going right into my soul, you know? And it was that song, like, you know, the big hit. This was like kind of right when she broke. So I was like, you know what? This sounds so good. It was just her and a guy at a piano. Let me go watch this. And I went and watched, and I'm trying to not think about this breakup and, you know, like not deal with this stuff and get through my workday. And I go sit in the part of the arena. I'm like by myself in the whole like mezzanine at the Staples Center. And there's a guy there playing piano, and it's Adele. And she sings that song like, "Oh friend, why are you so scared?" You know that song?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
I don't know why it's somebody like you, or whatever, however it goes, you know, that big hit song, you know, and I'm blubbering, dude, because it's like she's just singing to me, and it's so powerful, you know. And that's what art does, you know, it shows us the common like emotions that we all share, you know. And she's a great artist. I'm just mentioning that because I saw like that she has a CBS special, a new album coming out. Like that's a legit real artist, you know, like, and that when you feel something like that and you're in the room with a bunch of other people, or you're sitting there by yourself, or somebody sort of touches you, you know, where you live in your heart space, like those are the gifts that you need to honor in life, and that you need to pay forward. And you don't need to be an Adele to do that, but you need to take that empathy and that spark of humanity and figure out a way to kind of share it. You know, as we were saying last week, like you have to find your own magic and then share it with the world. And that can be anything. It can be saving creatures. It can be making healthy choices, you know, and thankfully the younger generation is much more hip to the environment because it's on them, you know, it's coming, you know, it's rained here for the last 2 days, like nor'easters, you know, and then it'll be 70 degrees in November. It's a horror story at this point, Jimmy. You know, when you watch a horror movie and like the teenage girl is walking out in the backyard to see why the dog is barking. She's like, oh, I'll just walk out there in my bikini at night and see why the dog's all upset. You know, like there's a monster out there. That's where we're at, you know, with the environment, right? And a lot of people just want to pretend it's not happening, you know, on both sides of the aisle, right? People are trying to be outraged that you're paying $4.40 for a thing of gas. It's $10 in Asia. It's $8 in Europe. They were paying $5 a gallon of gas 20 years ago, like we should have been. It's a luxury product. It shouldn't be cheap. It's like I was saying about those clothes or a hamburger. You know, hamburger shouldn't be $2, Jimmy. It's a human, it was an animal. It was a living creature. That should be a luxury, you know, especially for what it does to the planet to raise that many cattle so Burger King can sell it, you know, at a cheap price for somebody. It can give somebody a heart attack by the time they're 60. You know, it's not even good for you. Those things should be taxed like vices. Right? Things should be expensive. Gas should be at the top of that list. And that may be unpopular, but cheap gas and just overconsumption, that was our gift to the world. That's what America has given the world. We destroyed it, and all the while we were doing it, we sold you this myth that we were the good guys. We were the heroes. We won World War II. Yeah, we did. We also got in real late. Canada was already there fighting. You know what I mean? We had to be shamed into World War II. And we had people that didn't even want to fight. And then when it came to fight, we had real heroes who showed up and fought. They stormed the beaches at Normandy, certain death, and they did it anyway. I'm not denigrating the heroism. Both of my grandfathers, intelligence officers in World War II that spent the rest of their careers serving our country. One in the NSA and one in basically foreign service, CIA kind of stuff, who had a big part in Vietnam and regretted it because he saw the corruption of it ultimately, But that's what we need to do. We need to get honest about why we fight wars, why we sell stuff, what our TV stations are really selling you, and get real as a people, because we can do great things. The nation that did win World War II, because ultimately we did win it. Let's face it, without our economic might and without just the sheer number of soldiers we sent over there, it would have been all over. Like Europe was already occupied and overwhelmed. So we were the heroes. But after it ended, it was like, we did the whole thing ourselves, buy a Cadillac, listen to Elvis, like here's John Wayne. Everybody who did it was white too, right? Which wasn't the case. And the black troops that came back from World War I and World War II still had to move off the sidewalk if a white man was crossing in front of them. They had to get out of the way. That's reprehensible. That's disgusting. And that should be taught to every student in every elementary school so it never happens again. That's not what you hide from. That's what you own so it doesn't happen again. And that's what they're fighting against now. That's what the GOP is fighting to preserve, the myth of American sort of white Christian supremacy, because it's a myth. If Jesus was alive today, they would murder him. Okay, the Republicans would have thrown him in a cage and set it on fire if he was talking about giving to the poor and treating your neighbors equally. You think Trump would have shared the stage with Jesus? He would have been so jealous. The dude doesn't like Christmas because it's not about him. I'm not kidding. He hates Christmas parties and all that because it's not about him. He doesn't get it. And he gets really mad. He can't sit there for too long if you're not paying attention to him.
I've asked you this before, brother, but do you think Trump thinks he's a god? Does he realize that he's a human being?
Yeah. He thinks he has the power over life and death, and he thinks nothing of people dying. It just came out that there were just these documents were released on Friday from the oversight committee that's looking into the pandemic, that they were pressuring the CDC to lie about how bad COVID was in the early days, and then they were destroying the documents that they did this on. Right. And Stephanie Wolkoff, who I know, said he would have all these private meetings at that time up in the residence. So it wasn't part of the record and they could just destroy the papers, in the trash, where he throws his empty Adderall bottles and stuff, So they were trying to pretend like it wasn't that big a deal because it was going to hurt him politically. Now, we all know that, when he kept the 50 people who had it on the boat and he's like, I don't want to bring up the numbers. It's only going to hurt me. But the fact that they were lying, downplaying science and trying to adjust it and spin it to make it look better, that's a war crime, man. 700,000 people died and he thought nothing of it. And that's why I spoke out, by the way. Why I broke my NDA was like, I tried to get my colleagues to do it and they were like, well, I want to work again. It's not worth it. He'll sue me. And, I said, nobody's going to work if this guy's president. You know how crazy he is. And what happened? Nobody worked for a year and a half. The whole country shut down. They didn't make any freaking TV shows last year. You couldn't go to work because the guy mismanaged it. And I knew he would do that. I didn't foresee a pandemic. I thought it was going to be like a nuclear war. That's what I was worried about. And he tried to do that. He asked if he could nuke a hurricane. You know what I mean? Like he wanted to drop bombs all the time. And he did. He dropped a Moab bomb in Pakistan and in Afghanistan, a bomb that had never been used before. No other president had used that bomb. We've had it, but Bush, Obama, nobody wanted it. It's basically like a nuclear bomb, the amount of damage it does. And Trump dropped it just for the hell of it. So yeah, he thinks he's a psychopath. He knows deep down how awful he is, because that's the root of all addictions is you have this hole inside of yourself that you're just like, I'm a piece of shit. Nobody loved me, right? So that's his base level, and he knows it. You could see it in his eyes. You could see it in that moment where he got booed at the baseball game a couple years ago, and you see him kind of cry and water up and sucking up his emotions, So he knows his kids don't like him. Like, that's why he has to pay everybody to hang out with him. And the only guys that are attracted to him are these little Goomba New Yorker guys, like, I want to be your lawyer, Mr. Trump. That kind of sound. You know what I mean? I'll shake down the porn star for you. Like, it's those kind of guys. This little mooch, and it's Guidos. He attracts Guidos. That's part of New York. The guys that were driving the Camaros and working out, and hey, I'm selling Bitcoin now. Well, why don't you come join me? I'm going to take over the world. Okay. Oh, didn't work out. I'm going to start a podcast. Now I'm on the left. Give me one of them Beyond Burgers. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, that guy. So
it's Goombas, cops love him. It's that binary. You're on my side, you can do no wrong. That's why Trump got away with sexual assault so often, because he had Keith Schiller, ex-NYPD sergeant, who was a rammer on the narcotics squad. That was Keith's job, was knocking down doors when they were doing drug raids. He was on the narco task force in the Bronx. So Keith was a guy who went with that big steel thing that knocked in your door. Yeah. They're called a rammer. And then they would recover all the product, all the kilos of coke that were in these safe houses. And after he was doing that, he walked up to Trump in court one day and said, you need to hire me to be in your security team. Because he saw something, obviously, in one of those raids, like, you just lost some product last night that if I was on the payroll, would have ended up in Trump Tower in Bindles instead of in an evidence locker at NYPD. And Trump hired him, and that's what happened, and nobody wants to talk about who Trump really was, because of the same thing I'm always pointing to, this corporate media engine. You don't think everybody knew who he was? Not everyone knew about certain stuff. Not everyone knew about the drugs, but everybody knew about how he treated women. He said it publicly. Everyone knew he wanted to bang Ivanka. Everyone knew she would give him lap dances. Like, there's photographs of this stuff. Everybody who worked on a show with him saw how he behaved. Everyone went home and told their wives about it. It was disgusting, but he existed in a world that allowed other people to make money. And if you can do that in America, you can get away with a lot of stuff. Bernie Madoff went to prison because he ripped off the wrong guys, right? He was running a Ponzi scheme for a long time, but ultimately he lost the wrong people's money, and they took him down, right? Bitcoin and all this other stuff is your next Ponzi scheme. It's terrifying. I just saw that your quarterback boy is selling Bitcoin. I didn't know that Aaron Rodgers has the little laser beam eyes on his Twitter page and stuff, and he's got all these tweets about Bitcoin and how he wants to get paid in Bitcoin. They should call it Brocoin, right? Like, Brocoin. Yeah, you should get in on Brocoin, bro.
Yeah, and John Gruden, a guy who had a written record of hate. Not only was his record extensive when it came to hate, it was written down. He's suing the NFL now for trying to ruin his career. Dude, you ruined it yourself. You wrote it in emails.
He's suing the NFL?
Yeah, he's suing Roger Goodell in the NFL for career damages. He's already made $40 million. I'm telling you.
That's white privilege. Right? I'm telling you. I'm just taking my headphones off. What can I add to that? He's suing the NFL. And it's not like he's not getting paid out on some of his contract for firing him, right? He doesn't get the whole thing, but they're not sending him out the door with bus fare, and half a sandwich or something, right? He's getting millions of dollars, and how he's suing because he's been wronged. I wanted to end the show here, but we got to talk about the legal system. Wealthy white people can abuse and use the legal system to their advantage ad nauseum. And generally what happens is it wears everybody else down, right? Trump was involved in 4,000 lawsuits before he became president. Think about that. Over 4,000 lawsuits before he was even president. You wouldn't get to be a school principal in a town if you had a record like that. It'd be like, no, dude, the common denominator here is you. Why are you always ending up in court? But he knew he could pay somebody or he could sue him, and little Joey Woodfloors down there in, Ocean County, New Jersey could only afford to sue for so long. And then ultimately he'd take pennies on the dollar. And that's what Trump does to people, and somehow we're acting like we're all afraid of it. We have the United States Department of Justice. They're supposed to be on our side. Yeah, everyone was rejoicing that like Steve Bannon got a subpoena. So what? It's just Steve Bannon. Go freaking take Trump out of there, like shackled around his ankles, and his little wrist, get some really small handcuffs and throw him on that motherfucker and perp walk him out of Mar-a-Lago, and I'll be impressed. Issuing an arrest warrant on a podcast host and allowing him to turn himself in Monday morning preserves that sort of we have dignity because I'm a wealthy white American who can afford a lawyer. As I said earlier, it's disgusting. Let me give you an example and then we'll shut up. And I don't know how many people know this. I probably talked about it before, but Trump had a helicopter pilot called Fred Weichelbaum or something like this, right? It was Trump's personal helicopter pilot in like the 80s and 90s. And the guy got busted for flying a bunch of kilos of cocaine up to Ohio, right?
Right.
Doing drug runs. He gets busted in Ohio for moving serious weight, like kilos, pounds of cocaine, right? Right. They get the case transferred from the federal jurisdiction in Ohio into Trump's sister's jurisdiction in North Jersey. His sister was a federal judge who helped him with tax evasion and obviously had to leave her position when he became president, and again, escape any consequence, right? But so they move it into her district in North Jersey. She knows, it's Trump's pilot, so it's going to look bad, so she recuses herself but handpicks the judge that she puts in her place, and he's sympathetic to the cause, and he reads a letter aloud in court, out loud in court, written by Trump about what a great guy his helicopter pilot is, right? And then the guy essentially gets a slap on the wrist, gets like a year or 14 months or something up in Danbury, which is a nice, no prison is nice, but it's not Rikers Island. You know what I mean? It's a federal, place, does 14 months or whatever, gets out, and Trump gives him a condo in Trump Tower. And the guy gets to sell drugs for the rest of his time, working for Trump, but he gets rewarded like a mob boss, right? Like, you kept your mouth shut, you did your time, here's your reward. Capiche?
Loyalty.
And nobody even talks about that case, and that's just one of the things that Trump did. Right? Like, that's in the book. There's a guy named James Zirin who wrote a book about the 4,000 cases, and that's just one example. That like most people probably listening to this podcast don't know that story. They have no idea. Like, you tell them about like his executives that died in the helicopter crash. I didn't know that happened. There's stuff like that all over this dude, right? So you could have dug into that and take it from that angle. Take it from the angle of how the judicial system is a weapon for the wealthy, and will keep a lot of people out of trouble for too long. And now it's shaped and eroded the structure of this country because it allowed somebody like Trump, who never should have gotten 10 feet, within the White House, or 100 feet or 1,000 feet in front of the White House, sat there for 4 years, still hasn't conceded, and is trying to run again.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And will run again. He will run again. What do you think? You think Trump's going to go to prison, or what do you think you're going to see sooner, Jimmy? Trump giving a speech running for president, or Trump walking into the gates of a prison?
He's going to be running for president. He wants the grift, if for nothing else. He'll get the cash and then hand it to DeSantis. I don't think, hopefully Trump will die between now and 24. I think with the amount of drugs he's done, somehow he's managed to stay alive artificially with all the IVs that get pumped into his veins. But, I think DeSantis or, Paul Gossar, we didn't talk about that psychopath, accusing, posting a video of AOC being murdered, and Matt Gaetz is still serving on committee. Like,
exactly.
It's a BS deal. Okay. Like, we've tried to warn for months now, but it's pretty damn clear.
Absolutely. And their excuse is always, it was a joke. Well, you know what?
Not funny.
Well, look, Hitler used cartoons. That's how you spread anti-Semitism back in World War II. They did it in cartoons, little cartoon ads, anti-Semitic stuff. And that guy, JD Peckerwood, I call him, JD Vance, another one of these butter in the milk face dude, looks like he drinks bacon fat smoothies for breakfast. Like, his whole thing defending Kyle was anti-Semitic. He started talking about global monotonists are trying to take down a kid. The wolves are at the door, all these dehumanizing things that you're talking about the other, and it's dangerous. because most people don't want to admit it, and they don't know that Germany was the highest educated nation on the planet, basically, in the 30s. You know, their level of education over the people that are supporting Trump is mind blowing. And they went for it. They looked the other way. That's why the Allied forces forced the German people to go and tour the concentration camps after we liberated them, because we wanted to show them this is what you did. This is what looking the other way and going along with fascism looks like. This is what happened to your friends and neighbors. Live with that. Right. And they were smarter than Americans. You know, look, we saw Kyle Rittenhouse's mom, you know, like we're not playing with a full deck here already. Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's sugar, salt, and fat. That's the American diet. I'm saying that metaphorically, but it also does something to your brain. You know, when you all you consume is Fox News and cheeseburgers, right? You are what you eat. So that's why they're like, eat more of it. Don't look at books, look at guns, look at the Bible, look at all this other stuff. You know, it's an epidemic and it's dangerous. It's a cancer, you know, that's eating this country from within. And it has to be treated in a way that it isn't being treated yet. You know, what we're doing now will not win this battle. No.
Hell no, it won't.
So on that happy note, folks, also gratitude. Look, here, I know this stuff is a bummer. This is like talking about the issues, right? But every day you wake up, you have the choice to just live that 24 hours ahead of you as the best version of you can be, okay? And none of this bad news is going to stop you from being kind, right? It's not going to stop you from making a difference, from looking at the choices and choosing something that's better for the planet, you know, of saying, hey, it's the last disposable bottle of shampoo I'm going to buy. You know, I'm not going to put Drano down my drain every time like there's hair in the sink, because that's going to end up in my groundwater, you know, and that's going to make the frogs have 10 eyes and stuff. You know, like there's all kinds of little things you can do. And when you feel overwhelmed, that's what you have to bring it to. Bring it back to the breath, you know, bring it back to just gratitude. How can I be kinder to myself today and to my friends and neighbors? Because it's like you said, Jimmy, people want to be nice. That's the other thing, you know, it's easy to be anonymous online and hate each other. It ain't so easy to do that in person, you know, and not even because of the threat of physical retaliation, but just because it feels better to be nice. It feels better to hold the door for somebody and say, hey, after you, have a good day, bro. Thanks. You too. Right? That feels good. That's love. That's an exchange of love and positive energy that gives you both a better result. And that's the campaign we need, right? Every opportunity you have to be kind, take it, share it. You can't OD on good things, on gratitude, right?
Well, and energy, I know this as a person with a disability, it's a finite resource like money or anything else. You know, use it appropriately, invest it in the things that are going to give you more energy. You know, there are people that when I get done talking with them, like you, I feel better. You know, don't be around the energy suckers. You know, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with too. So it might include meeting new people and trying to learn something new about somebody that you don't know. I know that seems like a basic thing, but it's, you know, in my podcast, I try to talk to folks that I wouldn't normally talk to and learn about them, because that helps me learn. You know,
well said, Jimmy, and tell them where they can find your podcast.
jbkonair.com. My initials, JBKONAIR. You can find it on there, and talk to my buddy Michael Lee, who graduated from the University of Indianapolis with me. He's a chiropractor and is going to be opening his own private practice in Indy, and talked a lot about movement and just, you know, he was like, you don't have to weight lift to be in shape. Any kind of movement is good. So for anybody wanting to get in better physical shape, I would recommend listening to my buddy Mike.
Yeah, move a muscle and change a mood. That's how it goes. You know, move for an hour a day and you'll be better. So all right, well, there you go. And I'm Noel Casler. You can find me at noelcasler.com. You can still get tickets for my show at the Wall Street Theater this Thursday, November 18th. It's going to be a big night for me. Thanks for coming. Anybody who's coming on here, come say hi to me afterwards. I'll be out in the lobby. I got some t-shirts for sale. I'll be at the City Winery in Boston on December 23rd for 2 shows, 6 and 9 p.m. And then I'll be in New York City in January at the Iridium. And you can always find me on Twitter with those mean jokes, that's me. But
Fat shaming.
Exactly. But I love you guys, and I want you to take care of yourselves. And we're gonna make this the best version of the US we've ever had. So I know it's dark. We got to be honest about where we're at. A business that doesn't take an honest inventory is kidding themselves about the value of their goods, right? That's all we have to do. We just got to do a little house cleaning and get everybody on the same page, and we'll make this a better place. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next week, and take care. Peace.